The stars above Earth were peaceful, calm, and full of beauty, until the sky broke open. Without warning, a fleet of massive alien warships appeared in Earth's orbit. They were dark, cold, and silent, shaped like jagged blades of metal drifting in space. They did not send messages. They did not speak. They simply fired. In seconds, the calm became chaos. Blue beams of energy rained down, cutting through satellites and shattering space stations. Earth's defense systems activated, but they were slow and weak compared to what was coming. Across the planet, people looked up and saw death falling from the sky. The invaders were unlike anything humanity had seen. No ships were ever recorded, like these in the galaxy. They moved with machine precision, their designs sharp and lifeless. Governments scrambled to respond, calling their fleets from Mars, the Moon, and the outer colonies. But one by one, those fleets fell. The enemy tore through Earth's defenses as if they were made of paper. They were soon given a name by frightened scientists and stunned military analysts, the Kiran Dominion. No human had ever heard of them before, but ancient records and deep space beacons hinted at a terrible force that moved through the stars, appearing only when a species reached a certain level of progress. The Kiran didn't just destroy, they judged. To them, life was a test. Civilizations were measured by their response to fear, power, and extinction. Those that fought with honor, unity, and selflessness might be spared. Those who failed vanished from history. Humanity had never been told of this test. Now, without a word, it had begun. Panic spread across the globe. Cities on the moon went dark. The Martian colonies sent distress signals that were quickly silenced. The United Nations fleet, though brave, could only delay the enemy for a short while. Human pilots fought hard, crashing their ships into enemy hulls, launching desperate last attacks, but the Kiran came in waves, endless and cold. Entire orbitals were destroyed. Civilian ships tried to flee and were hunted down. Even the largest stations, thought to be safe, were broken apart by strange weapons that tore metal like cloth. Earth had not faced a threat like this in its entire history. But far beyond human eyes, in the deepest part of space where even light was afraid to go, something ancient watched. They had no name among humans, but to the oldest alien species, they were called the Athari, beings of light and thought. Neither flesh nor machine, the Athari had existed long before stars filled the sky. For millions of years they had watched from the shadows. They never spoke, never interfered. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had seen brave heroes die and tyrants crumble. They believed that their role was only to observe and learn. But something about the human race had caught their attention. Perhaps it was the speed of their growth or their strange mix of kindness and rage. Perhaps it was their refusal to give up even when the odds were impossible. Whatever the reason, the Athari watched more closely as Earth burned. In silence, they observed the fall of Earth's defenses. They studied the fire and the human response, the quick thinking, the stubborn courage, the small acts of bravery in the face of certain death. They saw a young species not yet ready for galactic war, but one that refused to bow. One that, even as it bled, refused to surrender. And slowly, among the Athari, ancient minds began to speak to one another again. It had been thousands of years since they had even considered action. But now, as blue fire swept across Earth's skies and human ships burned like falling stars, the thought began to grow. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was time. But humanity didn't know any of that yet. They only knew that they were being attacked by a force beyond understanding. They only knew that their ships were falling, their colonies were gone, and their home was next. And still, somewhere in that fire and fear, a voice remained calm. A captain stood on the bridge of a burning ship, staring at the growing shadow in space. Her name was Elara Miles. She clenched her fists, narrowed her eyes, and spoke the words that would begin the next chapter of humanity's story. We're not done yet. Captain Elara Miles stood on the bridge of the HSS Valiant, the flagship of Earth's last remaining fleet. The ship shuddered with every hit it took, metal groaning and lights flickering as the Kirin Dominion's relentless assault tore through the defenses around Earth. Outside the thick glass, the stars seemed distant and cold, but the real battle was much closer, right there in orbit, where the fate of humanity hung by a thread. Ilara's crew was tired and scared, but they refused to show it. They knew the odds were against them. Their fleet was shattered, with most ships already destroyed or drifting helplessly. The Valiant was battered and scarred, yet it still flew, powered by the stubborn will of its captain and crew. Ilara's voice was calm but firm as she addressed the bridge. "We're the last line of defense," she said. "If we fall, Earth falls. We can't let that happen." Around her, young officers and battle-hardened veterans prepared for what seemed like a hopeless fight. They had no reinforcements, no secret weapon yet, only their courage and determination. As the Kirin fleet advanced like a dark storm, Ilara studied the enemy's formation. Their ships were huge, moving with a precision that felt more like machines than living beings. The Kirin didn't waste energy or time. They attacked in waves, striking where the defenses were weakest. Every human ship that moved to meet them was cut down. The sky above Earth was full of explosions, trails of debris and flickering fires from destroyed vessels. The Valiant maneuvered through the chaos, dodging blasts and returning fire with all its might. The human fleet was small now, just a handful of ships fighting desperately to keep the Kirin at bay. Each ship carried a crew who knew they might never return home, but they fought anyway because the people below were counting on them. Ilara's plan was dangerous but simple. She had discovered a strange signal hidden inside the Kirin's command network. It was unlike anything seen before, a pulsing rhythm that seemed almost alive, like a heartbeat buried inside the enemy's war machines. It suggested that the Kirin fleet wasn't just a mindless army. It had a central core, a heart that controlled the rest. If they could reach that core and destroy it, the whole fleet might fall apart. But it was deep inside the largest Kirin warship, a fortress moving steadily toward Earth's surface. Getting there would be like flying into the jaws of a monster. Still, Ilara knew they had no choice. She gathered her closest officers, Sergeant Kale, a fierce Martian soldier with scars marking battles fought on dusty red sands, Dr. Lyra Chen, a cybernetics expert who understood alien technology better than anyone else, and Private Jonah Reyes, a young recruit who had lost everything in the first strikes but refused to give up. Together, they prepared the Valiant and a small squadron for a desperate strike. The mission was clear: break through the Kirin's defenses, reach the core ship, and deliver a devastating blow. As they moved closer to the enemy, the tension on the bridge grew thick. The Valiant shook under heavy fire, alarms blaring as shields flickered. Ilara's hands gripped the control panel tightly. Every decision was life or death. The crew worked like one, focused and precise. They weaved between enemy beams, launched counterattacks, and shielded weaker ships. The young pilot beside Ilara shouted as he took down an enemy fighter, but there was no time for celebration. More ships came forward, and the Valiant's weapons cooled just long enough to fire again. Suddenly, the hidden signal grew stronger. The heart of the Kirin fleet was near. Ilara gave the order to prepare the special weapon she had been developing, with Dr. Chen, an experimental bomb that could disrupt the enemy's core systems if detonated inside the command ship. The plan was risky. Getting close meant almost certain death, but it was the only hope to save Earth. With the crew ready, the Valiant charged forward, leading the squadron through a gauntlet of fire. The Kirin fleet fought fiercely to stop them, but something in the human determination seemed to surprise the enemy. They pressed on, dodging blasts and using every trick they had learned from past battles. The Valiant took hit after hit, but Ilara refused to pull back. As they neared the massive command ship, the hidden signal pulsed stronger than ever. It was a living thing, a strange mix of machine and organic matter, glowing faintly beneath the cold metal surface. Ilara's heart pounded, but she stayed focused. They fired the bomb, and the explosion tore through the core, sending shockwaves that shook the fleet. The Kirin warships faltered. Some turned away, others broke apart. The victory was costly, Many ships were lost. The Valiant was badly damaged, but the human fleet had bought Earth precious time. Above all, Alara saw something new in her crew, a flicker of hope. They had faced death and still stood. They had fought back when it seemed impossible. The battle was far from over, but for now humanity had shown it would not fall quietly. And somewhere far beyond, the ancient watchers known as the Athari noticed. They had seen the strength, the will, and the spark of something rare in humanity. The fight was just beginning, but so was a new chapter for Earth. The explosion in the heart of the Kirin command ship sent ripples through the enemy fleet, scattering their formations and causing confusion. For the first time, humanity saw a crack in what seemed like an unstoppable force. But the victory was not without cost. The HSS Valiant drifted heavily damaged, its hull scarred and its systems barely holding together. The crew was exhausted, many injured, and their supplies running low. Yet in the midst of this dire situation, Captain Alara Miles refused to surrender. She knew this was only the beginning of a much larger war, one that would test every ounce of human strength and spirit. In the days that followed, Earth's remaining ships gathered in secret, repairing what they could and planning their next moves. The Martian and lunar colonies sent survivors and reinforcements where possible, but communication was fractured, and every signal risked interception by the Kirin scouts still lurking in the shadows of space. The Kirin Dominion was relentless, striking at weak points, crushing supply lines, and isolating human outposts. Their attacks were cold and calculated, showing no mercy. Yet despite the overwhelming power, the human spirit only grew stronger. Among the crew of the Valiant, new leaders emerged. Sergeant Kale, the battle-worn Martian, trained soldiers in hand-to-hand combat and survival tactics. His harsh but caring presence became a beacon for those who had lost hope. Dr. Lyra Chen worked tirelessly to understand and reverse-engineer Kirin technology, her sharp mind unlocking secrets that could turn the tide of battle. Private Jonah. Reyes, the young recruit who had once been overwhelmed by fear, found courage in the struggle and became a skilled pilot, flying dangerous missions with a fierce determination. Together, this small team embodied the resilience that defined humanity. Ilara herself faced moments of deep doubt. She walked through the corridors of the Valiant, visiting the wounded, hearing their stories, and feeling the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Each decision meant lives lost or saved, and she knew that the survival of her people depended on her strength. One night, as Earth's blue glow shone faintly through the viewport, she confided in Lyra, "We fight not just to survive, but to prove that we deserve to live, that we are more than just a species waiting to be wiped out." As the humans regrouped, the Kirin prepared their next strike. The enemy's command corps, though damaged, was not destroyed. It rebuilt itself with terrifying speed, growing stronger and more dangerous. The Kirin unleashed a new wave of warships, faster and more aggressive than before. Entire sectors of space fell under their shadow. Colonies on the edge of human-controlled space sent desperate calls for help, calls that often came too late. It seemed the Kirin would never stop, but the humans had something the Kirin did not: ingenuity and the will to adapt. Using stolen Kirin technology, Dr. Chen developed powerful new weapons and shield systems. Engineers worked day and night to retrofit old ships, turning them into deadly war machines. Pilots learned to fly in coordinated groups, using tactics that combined speed, surprise, and sheer courage. Battles became fierce and brutal. The silence of space was shattered by the roar of engines, the flash of laser fire, and the explosions of destroyed ships. One battle, fought near the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, became a turning point. The Kirin unleashed a massive fleet aiming to crush the human resistance once and for all. But Alara and her squadron, flying in tight formation, struck back with precision and heart. Jonah led a daring maneuver through the dense asteroid field, dodging blasts and flanking the enemy from behind. Kale commanded ground teams that boarded enemy ships, fighting with ferocity to disable their systems. The fight was brutal, and many lives were lost, but the humans won. The Kirin fleet was pushed back, retreating into the darkness. In that moment, the human race began to believe The victory was not just tactical, it was a symbol. Against all odds, they could stand, up to a force that had seemed invincible. Earth was still in danger, but the spark of hope burned brighter than ever. Far beyond the battlefield, the Ethari observed quietly. They saw humans rising from defeat, learning, fighting not just with weapons but with heart. The Watchers understood something ancient. This was not a simple battle of ships and lasers. It was a test of spirit, of unity, of what it truly meant to survive. The humans were growing, changing, earning a place not just as survivors but as worthy allies. As the battered Valiant limped back toward Earth for repairs, Ilara looked out into the endless black of space. She knew the war ahead would be long and hard. She knew sacrifices would come, friends would fall, and darkness would try to snuff out the light. But she also knew this: humanity would never stop fighting. Not while there was breath in their bodies and fire in their souls. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope. The war for survival had become a war for a future, and humanity was ready to claim it. The HSS Valiant had returned to Earth's orbit, battered but alive, and the crew worked tirelessly to repair what the Kirin had shattered. The station around the planet buzzed with activity as engineers, medics, and soldiers prepared for what was coming next. Earth was no longer just a home. It was a fortress, the last beacon of hope for humanity. Captain Ilara Miles walked through the repair bays, her face set with quiet determination. She knew the Kirin would strike again, harder, and more furious than before. The scars of the last battle were still fresh, but the spirit of the people was unbroken. The defense of Earth had become a rallying cry that spread through every colony, every ship, and every soldier. Ilara's mind raced with plans and strategies, knowing that the next attack might be the one that decided everything. In the heart of Earth's orbit, a new weapon was being developed, something that could change the course of the war. Dr. Lyra Chen had poured all her knowledge into creating a device unlike any other, a pulse cannon capable of disabling entire fleets by targeting the Kirin's organic machine core. It was a risky weapon, untested, but the best chance humanity had. The pulse cannon could disrupt the strange biological energy that powered the Kirin's ships, turning their greatest strength into a fatal weakness. As the scientists worked day and night, soldiers trained harder than ever. Sergeant Kale drilled the troops, preparing them for boarding actions and close combat against alien enemies, who were not only strong, but terrifyingly relentless. His lessons were harsh but necessary. Every soldier learned that the battle would be fought in space and on enemy decks, where courage and quick thinking would be the difference between life and death. Meanwhile, across the stars, human colonies under Kirin control were simmering with unrest. Many had been crushed by the Dominion's iron grip, but whispers of rebellion grew louder. The Kirin's cruelty had sparked something unexpected, a desire for freedom that even the most broken could not ignore. Hidden groups of humans and sympathetic aliens started sabotaging supply lines, attacking patrols and sending secret messages to Earth. These rebels were desperate and scattered, but they were fierce and determined. Their courage gave Earth another weapon: information. The rebels' knowledge of Kirin movements and weaknesses became invaluable for planning counterattacks and saving innocent lives. Ilara received encrypted messages from these groups, their voices filled with hope and pain, urging humanity not to give up. The Kirin, aware of the growing resistance, responded with brutal force. Entire colonies were razed to the ground as warnings, innocent lives lost in flames that lit the cold darkness of space. These atrocities hardened humanity's resolve. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about justice, about reclaiming their freedom from an enemy that showed no mercy. Ilara found herself speaking more often to her crew about why they fought. She told them stories of the fallen and the brave, reminding them that their sacrifices were the foundation of a future they all dreamed of. The weight of command was heavy, but it was balanced by the fire she saw in every face on the Valiant. The Buber fire to protect, to fight, and to win. As the Kirin fleet regrouped, a new threat emerged. A massive warship, larger and deadlier than any before, appeared on the edge of the solar system. It was a fortress bristling with weapons and guarded by swarms of smaller fighters. This ship was the new command center, the heart of the Kieran's next invasion. Ilara and her commanders studied it closely, realizing that to save Earth and their colonies they had to destroy this giant before it could unleash devastation. The pulse cannon's development became urgent. Every moment delayed gave the enemy more time to strengthen. Ilara assembled a strike team for a daring mission. Alongside Sergeant Kale, Dr. Chen, and Private Reyes, new allies joined them. Pilots who had flown through the deadliest fights, engineers who could repair ships under fire, and spies who knew the enemy's secrets. The team trained relentlessly, learning to work as one. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the Kieran fortress, use the pulse cannon to cripple its core, and survive long enough for reinforcements to arrive. The risks were staggering, but so was the prize. Failure meant Earth's destruction. Success could change the fate of the galaxy. As the day of the mission approached, tension tightened the air like a drawn bow. Families said hurried goodbyes and soldiers checked their gear for the last time. Ilara stood before her crew, her voice steady as she reminded them of the stakes. "This is more than a battle," she said. "It is the moment we prove what humanity is made of. Not just our strength, but our heart. We fight because we must, but also because we will not be broken." The Valiant and its squadron slipped quietly through space, moving toward the Kieran fortress. The crew felt the weight of silence, knowing that once the battle began, nothing would be the same. As the massive enemy ship loomed closer, glowing with dark energy, the strike team prepared for the fight of their lives. The pulse cannon was ready, an untested hope in the vast, cold darkness. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and every heartbeat echoed with the promise of either victory or sacrifice. The moment the Valiant squadron neared the massive Kieran fortress, the vastness of space seemed to tighten around them like a noose. The enemy warship loomed ahead, a monstrous silhouette against the distant stars, its surface alive with blinking lights and thrumming with an ominous pulse. The fleet's fighters spread out, weaving through dense fields of asteroids and debris left from previous battles, readying for the deadly dance that was about to begin. The tension inside the Valiant was electric. Every crew member felt the weight of the mission pressing on their shoulders. This was no ordinary fight. It was a desperate gamble that could end humanity's chance for survival or ignite a spark that would burn through the darkness of oppression. Captain Ilara Miles gave the final orders. The plan was simple but dangerous. Break through the outer defenses, get close enough to fire the pulse cannon and disable the core that powered the Kieran's organic machines. The pulse cannon, a weapon born of human ingenuity and desperation, was their last hope to turn the tide. But reaching the heart of the fortress meant surviving swarms of enemy fighters, deadly turrets, and traps designed to crush any intruder. The air was thick with fear and determination as the squadron launched into the chaos, engines roaring, lasers slicing through space like streaks of lightning. The Kieran defenses responded swiftly and brutally. Waves of sleek, insect-like fighters poured out of hidden bays, their movements sharp and coordinated. The Valiant's pilots, led by the brave and skilled Jonah Reyes, weaved through enemy fire with sharp reflexes and fierce resolve. Explosions erupted as ships collided and blazed in the void. The battle was a violent storm of light and shadow, with every second feeling like a lifetime. Jonah pushed his fighter to the limits, dodging blasts that could tear his ship apart. He called out commands to his squad mates, their voices tight with focus. Every pilot knew the stakes. One mistake meant death, not just for themselves, but for the entire mission. Meanwhile, on board the Valiant, Sergeant Kell prepared his boarding teams. Their objective was to infiltrate the Kieran ship once the pulse cannon had done its work, to disable any remaining defenses and secure the core. The soldiers moved like shadows through the corridors, weapons ready and nerves steeled. Kale's voice was calm, but commanding, a steady rock in the storm. He reminded his team of what was at stake, not just their own lives, but the future of humanity. They carried memories of lost friends and burning worlds, fueling their fierce determination to fight back. Every step deeper into the alien ship brought new dangers, twisting passages, strange creatures lurking in the dark and traps set to kill without mercy. Dr. Lyra Chen worked alongside the engineers to monitor the pulse cannon systems, her hands steady despite the chaos. She watched the energy levels climb, feeling the weight of hope and fear intertwined. The cannon was a marvel of human science, a weapon designed to disrupt the Kirin's unique life energy network. If it worked, entire fleets could be rendered powerless in an instant. But it had never been tested in battle before, and the margin for error was razor thin. Lyra's thoughts flickered to the families waiting back home, to the children who dreamed of a peaceful future. She silently promised herself that this fight would not be in vain. As the battle raged outside, the Valiant closed in on the fortress. The pulse cannon charged with a low hum, filling the ship with tense energy. Captain Alara gave the order to fire. A beam of brilliant light shot forth, cutting through the darkness and striking the Kirin ship's core. For a moment, the fortress shuddered. Systems flickered and died as the pulse rippled through the enemy's biomechanical network. The massive warship's lights dimmed, its defenses faltered. A cheer rose from the Valiant's crew, but there was no time to celebrate. The Kirin were not defeated yet. In the chaos, alarms blared, and the ship shook violently. The Kirin launched a desperate counterattack, sending reinforcements and activating hidden weapons. Boarding parties clashed with Kale's team in narrow corridors filled with smoke and sparks. The soldiers fought with raw courage, their shouts and the roar of gunfire echoing through the alien ship. Kyle moved swiftly, leading his men through brutal hand-to-hand combat, outsmarting traps, and disabling critical systems. Each step forward was paid with blood and sweat, but they pressed on, driven by the vision of victory. Jonah, piloting through the outer defenses, took down enemy fighters with precision, buying time for the boarding teams. His heart pounded as he dodged missiles and energy blasts, pushing beyond fear to embrace the fierce will to live and protect. The squadron's success depended on his skill and courage. As the battle reached its peak, he felt the bond between human pilots grow stronger, a unity born of shared danger and unwavering hope. The Kirin warship, now crippled but not destroyed, began to collapse inward, its systems failing in a cascade of destruction. The boarding teams raced to escape, carrying vital data that could expose the enemy's secrets. The Valiant called for retreat, engines blazing as they pulled away from the dying fortress. Outside, the void was eerily silent, once more broken only by the hum of damaged ships limping back to safety. The mission had been a success, but at a heavy cost. Many brave souls were lost, their sacrifice etched into the stars. Yet humanity had struck a decisive blow against an enemy that had seemed unbeatable. The pulse cannon had worked. The Kirin's mighty fortress was shattered, and the spirit of Earth's defenders burned brighter than ever. Captain Alara and her crew knew the road ahead was still long and dangerous, but for the first time, they carried hope. Not just to survive, but to win. The battle was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had only just begun. The destruction of the Kirin fortress sent ripples across the galaxy, shaking the Dominion's grip on the stars and lighting a fire in the hearts of countless oppressed worlds. Earth's victory was a beacon, a sign that the mighty enemy was not invincible. Yet the cost of the battle weighed heavily on the survivors. The Valiant limped back to Earth's orbit, scarred but unbroken, carrying the wounded and the memories of those who did not return. Captain Alara Miles stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the endless blackness beyond the viewports, knowing the war had only just entered a new, more dangerous phase. The Kirin would not retreat quietly. Their fury would now burn hotter, fueled by humiliation and loss. Every sensor on the ship pulsed with incoming signals, warnings of fleets mobilizing, new threats awakening in the dark reaches of space. In response to the victory, a wave of hope and urgency swept across the human colonies scattered through the galaxy. News of the Kirin's defeat spread like wildfire, inspiring uprisings on worlds once crushed under their rule. Rebel groups gained strength, rallying under the banner of freedom and the promise that Earth was fighting alongside them. These rebellions, while brave, were still fractured and poorly equipped compared to the Dominion's vast armies. It became clear that Earth's role was not only to defend itself, but to unite these disparate forces into a single, unstoppable front. Diplomatic missions launched, sending envoys to alien species who had suffered under Kieran oppression, offering alliance and aid. Some welcomed the hand of friendship, while others remained cautious, scarred by centuries of domination. Yet, slowly a coalition began to form, humans and aliens standing shoulder to shoulder against a common enemy. Captain Ilara found herself thrust into new roles beyond commanding battles. She met with leaders from various colonies, learning their customs and struggles, building trust where suspicion had reigned. The weight of leadership pressed on her, but she embraced it, knowing that the survival of humanity and its allies depended on unity. Her crew, too, adapted to this new reality. Soldiers trained alongside alien warriors, sharing tactics and stories. Scientists worked to combine their knowledge, developing new technologies that blended human innovation with alien wisdom. The Valiant became more than a warship. It was a symbol of resistance, a mobile heart of the Alliance. Amid these efforts, Dr. Lyra Chen analyzed data retrieved from the destroyed Kieran fortress, uncovering secrets that hinted at even darker threats. The Kieran had been experimenting with biological weapons far deadlier than anything humanity had faced before. Plans to weaponize entire star systems, turning planets into living bombs, sent chills through the scientific community. Lyra worked tirelessly to understand and counter these horrors, racing against time to develop defenses before the Kieran could deploy them. Her discoveries deepened the urgency of the Alliance's mission, not just to fight but to stop the Dominion's catastrophic plans from coming to life. Back on the battlefields of space, new encounters tested humanity's resolve and growing alliances. Skirmishes erupted as Kieran patrols attempted to crush rebellions and regain lost ground. Each fight was brutal and costly, but every victory, no matter how small, strengthened the coalition's confidence. Sergeant Kyle led teams, on daring raids, striking supply lines and freeing prisoners held in horrific conditions. These missions forged bonds between humans and alien fighters, blending courage and skill in ways the Dominion had never expected. Stories of bravery spread quickly, lifting spirits even in the darkest moments. The Alliance was proving that together, they could challenge a foe that had seemed unstoppable. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Different species had long histories of conflict and mistrust. Cultural misunderstandings sparked arguments during crucial planning sessions. Some feared that humanity's rapid rise might overshadow their allies, breeding jealousy and resentment. Captain Ilara worked tirelessly to ease these strains, emphasizing that survival required cooperation, respect, and sacrifice from all. She reminded everyone that the Kieran thrived on division and that only unity would bring victory. It was a fragile peace, but it held firm as the coalition prepared for what was coming next. The Kieran, recovering from their defeat, unleashed a new terror. A fleet of shadowy warships, faster and more lethal than before, appeared on the edges of Allied space. Their arrival was a stark reminder that the Dominion was adapting, evolving to crush the growing resistance. The coalition's leaders convened in urgent council, knowing the coming battle would test everything they had built. Captain Ilara volunteered to lead the defense, knowing that the fight for the galaxy's future rested on their shoulders once more. As the new war fleet advanced, the Alliance mobilized every available ship and soldier. The human fleet, now bolstered by alien allies, prepared for a confrontation that would decide the fate of countless worlds. Pilots trained relentlessly, engineers worked through the night to upgrade weapons and shields, and medics braced for the inevitable toll. In the quiet moments before the storm, Ilara reflected on the journey so far. The losses, the sacrifices, the friendships forged in fire. The pulse cannon had shattered the enemy's fortress, but the battle for freedom was far from over. The sky ahead burned with the glow of distant warships. Ilara's voice came steady over the comms, rallying her fleet with the words that had become their battle cry. For every world taken, we fight harder. For every life lost, we carry their memory into the stars. We are not alone. We stand together. For freedom, for hope, for humanity. The Alliance braced itself, ready to face the coming darkness with fierce hearts and unbreakable will. The war for the galaxy was entering its most dangerous chapter, but the bond humanity had earned, and, forged with others, would be their greatest weapon of all. The warning came just as the Coalition fleet was preparing to regroup after weeks of skirmishes and rebuilding. Sensors picked up a sudden, massive surge of enemy vessels moving at impossible speeds, a shadowy armada that seemed to blot out the stars themselves. The Kirin had unleashed their deadliest weapon yet, a fleet of ships capable of striking anywhere, anytime, with devastating power. Panic rippled through the Allied command centers as commanders scrambled to understand the scale of the threat. Captain Alara Miles stood at the forefront of this storm, her hands steady on the controls of the Valiant, her mind sharp and focused. She knew that this battle would not just test their firepower, but their very spirit. The approaching enemy armada was unlike anything humanity and its allies had faced before. These new ships moved with eerie precision, coordinated like a living organism. They cut through space with deadly efficiency, targeting supply lines, communication hubs, and undefended colonies with ruthless speed. Entire planets found themselves isolated overnight, cut off from help, and facing the looming threat alone. The Alliance's strength was tested as never before, forcing their forces to stretch thin and operate under constant pressure. Desperation crept into the hearts of many, but for Alara and her crew, it was a call to fight harder, to become the shield for those who could not protect themselves. Amid this chaos, Jonah Reyes, the ace pilot, flew sortie after sortie, pushing his fighter through relentless waves of enemy drones and warships. His skill was unmatched, but even he felt the weight of exhaustion and loss. His close calls had become a constant reminder that no victory came without sacrifice. His team's camaraderie and shared purpose became the fuel that kept him going. They were more than pilots. They were the galaxy's guardians, humanity's front line. Each dogfight was a desperate struggle, filled with moments where one wrong move meant death, yet Jonah's determination never faltered. He knew the lives of millions depended on their success. On board the Valiant, Sergeant Cale prepared his squads for boarding missions aimed at crippling the armada from within. These raids were perilous. Enemy ships were more fortified and their crews more brutal than ever. Cale's men fought with fierce resolve, using every trick they had learned. Close-quarters battles were savage and unforgiving, echoing with the sounds of blaster fire and shouts of pain and defiance. Every mission was a dance with death, but the team's bond kept them strong. Kyle himself led from the front, inspiring his soldiers through acts of courage and sacrifice. Their successes disrupted enemy operations, buying precious time for the fleet to regroup and counterattack. Meanwhile, Dr. Lyra Chen worked feverishly in the ship's lab, analyzing fragments of enemy technology captured during raids. The Kirin's weapons had evolved, bio-organic systems integrated with advanced machinery, creating weapons that seemed almost alive. Lyra's research revealed vulnerabilities hidden beneath their terrifying power. She shared her findings with engineers, sparking a race to develop new defenses and countermeasures. Her discoveries offered a glimmer of hope, showing that even the deadliest foe could be outsmarted. Lyra's quiet determination and scientific brilliance became a beacon for the crew, reminding them that intelligence and innovation were as powerful as firepower. The Alliance's leaders convened often, their meetings tense and urgent. Political and cultural differences threatened to unravel the fragile unity, but the shared threat kept them focused. Captain Alara worked tirelessly to mediate disputes, reminding everyone that their survival depended on cooperation and trust. She understood that beyond the weapons and tactics, the true battle was for the soul of the Alliance. Their enemies sought to divide and conquer, but humanity's resilience and willingness to fight for more than just themselves bound the coalition together. It was a delicate balance, maintained through respect, honesty, and shared sacrifice. The enemy armada closed in for a decisive strike. The coalition fleet gathered in a vast formation near a critical star system. The battle that followed was cataclysmic. Starships clashed in brilliant flashes of light and roaring explosions. Fighters darted through missile fire. Capital ships launched volleys that turned the void into a storm of destruction. Captain Ilara's voice cut through the chaos, coordinating maneuvers, rallying the fleet with unwavering calm. The Valiant became a pivot point, shielding weaker ships and leading counterattacks. Jonah and his pilots fought with unmatched courage, diving into enemy lines to disrupt their formations. Sergeant Kale's boarding parties executed daring strikes that crippled enemy command vessels. Every member of the Alliance pushed beyond their limits, united in purpose and spirit. Despite overwhelming odds, the coalition's combined strength and strategy began to turn the tide. The enemy's advanced technology and brutal tactics met human ingenuity and alien collaboration that surprised even the Kiran commanders. Ships once thought invincible were shattered, enemy pilots fled or were captured. The battle raged for hours, a brutal test of endurance and will. When the last enemy ship exploded into the void, silence fell, a heavy, almost sacred silence that spoke of both victory and loss. The survivors looked to the stars with a mixture of relief and grief, knowing many comrades had paid the ultimate price. Captain Ilara stood on the bridge, watching the remnants of the battle drift away. Her heart was heavy with the cost, but her spirit burned bright. The Alliance had endured the deadliest assault yet and emerged stronger. This victory was not just a turning point in the war, but a symbol of what humanity could achieve when it stood with others as equals. The bonds, forged in fire and blood, had earned respect across the galaxy. They had not only survived the storm, they had become a force no one could ignore. As the fleet set course for the next challenge, Ilara's thoughts lingered on the future. The war was far from over, but the coalition was ready. The sacrifices of the past fueled their resolve, and their unity was their greatest weapon. The stars ahead were uncertain and dangerous, but humanity and its allies would face them together. For the first time, they were no longer alone in the vast darkness. They had earned their place, their bond sealed through trial and triumph, and whatever came next, they would meet it as one. The final battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The combined forces of humanity and their allies faced the Kiran's last desperate attempt to crush the rebellion once and for all. The enemy fleet surged forward like a tidal wave, dark and endless, filling the void with ships of every size and weapon. But the Alliance was ready, and their resolve was stronger than ever. Captain Ilara stood firm on the bridge of the Valiant, her eyes sharp and steady as she coordinated the fleet's defenses. Every ship was positioned with care, every pilot and soldier ready to give everything they had. The tension was thick, but beneath it lay a fierce hope, a hope born from every battle fought, every loss mourned, every victory earned. As the enemy closed in, space erupted with fire and light. Missiles streaked across the void, energy beams cut through hulls, and explosions blossomed like deadly stars. The Valiant led a bold charge, breaking through the enemy's outer lines to strike at their command vessels. Jonah and his squadron soared through the chaos, weaving through enemy fire to disable critical weapon systems. On the ground, Sergeant Kale's teams launched boarding assaults that turned enemy ships into battlegrounds of fierce hand-to-hand combat. Every fight was brutal and close, testing the limits of endurance and will. The Alliance fought not just for survival, but for a future where freedom could thrive. In the midst of battle, unexpected allies emerged. A mysterious species known only as the Othari appeared from a nearby nebula. Their sleek ships joined the fight, bringing strange but powerful technology that tipped the scales. Their reason for helping was unclear, but their arrival brought renewed strength and hope to the Alliance. This act of solidarity deepened the bonds between the different races, proving that when united, even the darkest threats could be overcome. Ilara welcomed the Othari aid cautiously but gratefully, knowing every advantage counted in this decisive moment. Amidst the swirling conflict, Ilara faced her greatest personal challenge. The Kiran flagship, a colossal dreadnought bristling with weapons, targeted the Valiant directly. The captain's ship took heavy hits, alarms blaring as systems failed one by one, yet Ilara remained calm, issuing orders with steady resolve. Her crew fought to keep the ship alive, repairing damage while returning fire. She knew that if the Valiant fell, the entire fleet's morale might break. The battle became a desperate dance of survival and attack. each moment charged with the weight of countless lives depending on their success. Jonah found himself in a fierce dogfight with the enemy's top ace pilot. The two weaved and darted through a deadly ballet of lasers and missiles, each trying to outsmart the other. Jonah's skill and quick thinking gave him the edge, but the fight took a toll. Both pilots suffered damage and close calls, pushing their ships to the brink. Finally, Jonah outmaneuvered his opponent, forcing the enemy fighter to break away in defeat. The victory was small but vital, lifting the spirits of the Allied pilots and weakening the enemy's elite forces. Below decks, Kale's squad cleared enemy corridors with unmatched courage. The fighting was brutal and chaotic, with every inch of ground contested fiercely. Kyle led his team forward despite injuries and exhaustion, their determination fueled by the knowledge that their success could turn the tide. Their assault reached the enemy's command center, where a fierce confrontation ended with Kyle personally capturing the Kirin commander. This victory shattered the enemy's leadership, sending shockwaves through their ranks. It was a turning point that the Alliance needed to press their advantage. As the battle raged on, the Alliance fleet adapted quickly, exploiting weaknesses discovered by Lyra's earlier research. New shields absorbed the Kirin's devastating attacks, and countermeasures disabled their advanced weaponry. The synergy of science, bravery, and unity began to unravel the enemy's carefully planned assault. Despite heavy losses, the Allied forces held firm, their fighting spirit unbroken. The galaxy watched in awe as humans and their allies fought not just with weapons, but with hearts bound by trust and sacrifice. When the final enemy ship exploded into a cloud of burning debris, silence fell over the battlefield. The Alliance had won, but the cost was written in the stars. The survivors mourned those lost but celebrated a hard-fought victory that ensured freedom and peace for countless worlds. Captain Ilara stood once more on the Valiant's bridge, her gaze steady and proud. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not just as fighters, but as friends and protectors. The bond they had formed with their allies was strong, forged in the fires of war and sealed by hope. As the fleet moved forward, a new chapter began. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and mysteries yet to be faced, but no longer would humanity be alone or underestimated. Their strength was not only in their weapons, but in their spirit, their unity, and their unyielding will to survive and protect. For eons, other civilizations had watched humanity from afar, uncertain what they might become. Now they had seen the truth. Humans were warriors, allies, and kin. The future was theirs to shape, together.